Down on the farm, 4:30, pulled up my pants, slipped out the door, down to the barn and run like the dickens to milk all the cows and feed those chickens. Out in the barnyard to curry roti jigs, separate the cream, slop all the pigs into my breakfast, eat like a Turk, and then I'm ready for a full day's work. Grease up the wagon, throw on the rack, put a jug of water in the old rain sack, harness up the mules and slide down the lane. We gotta get the hay and it looks like rain. Look over yonder, sure as you're born, sheep's in the meadow, cows in the corn. Started over cross, got to run a mile or two, even as the wind blows and wet right through. Back for the mules and the red compence, roadies a straddle over a barbed wire fence. Worked all summer, the fall is nigh, figured at the bank and heaved a big sigh. Happy to be here with you all tonight. Seemed like an appropriate song to start this night out with after this beautiful drive out to this barn. The instrument I was playing, you may or may not be familiar with. It's called a Jew's harp or a jaw harp. Old-time instrument, has quite a long history here in New York State. They think the Pilgrims brought the first of these to America with them. And ever since then, they have been a popular instrument. People used to carry them around in their shirt pockets. And when they were taking a break from their work or whatever they were doing, before we had radios and CDs and iPods, before we could press a button and hear music, little pocket instruments like this were a little more common. Just made out of metal. Any blacksmith could have made one. And most of it's just a frame. You just hold onto it, onto the edges. But then it's got this little lever in the middle. You pull it back and let it go, and it vibrates. It goes back and forth real fast. But as you can see, it doesn't make much sound until you press it up against your teeth. Once you do that, then your mouth kind of becomes the amplifier, and you get that. Not doing anything with my mouth, it's just providing a sound chamber. Now if you breathe in and out kind of loud and exaggerated while you pull on that lever, and keep your tongue out of the way. Right? And then I figured out if you wiggle your tongue around a little, you could make it sound like the TV, like when people bump their heads together on the cartoons. And that's how they make that sound on the cartoons, I found out. But neat instrument. The Canalers used to play them. The Iroquois Indians here in New York State were fascinated by these. The British would bring them over in boxes of 100 at a time and trade with the Iroquois for beaver skins. So I like to imagine the Iroquois as they trotted through the forest going. Who knows? They might have.
Yes.
Well, I like to learn about the music that our ancestors here in New York State used to entertain themselves with, back when people used to do that sort of thing a little more often. We really did have a very musical heritage here. People made their own music for entertainment, just like they did down south and in other places. But our area has not gotten as much, is not as well known for that sort of homemade type of music. And so I've done a lot of research over the years and just looking into the songs that people sang and played and passed along from generation to generation. There's a family called the Stevens family who moved from New England to Western New York, where I live, in the 1830s. They moved from New England at a time that a lot of people were moving west from New England. My part of the state was not settled as early as your part of the state. And so once the Revolutionary War ended and the Iroquois Indians were relocated, things opened up for white settlement, and lots of New England farmers who were finding the soil a little bit too rocky in New England started to come out to my area, to central and western New York, for the farming, which was thought to be superior. So that was the case with the Stevens family. But luckily for us, a couple of the kids of this man, Artemus Stevens, decided it would be a good idea to write down, to keep a journal, write down the lyrics to the songs that their dad used to sing to them at night for entertainment. So all through the 1840s and 50s, they amassed this collection. It ended up being almost 90 songs. Some of these things are 30 and 40 verses long. One of them is 53 verses long. I won't be singing that one tonight. But wonderful old ballads, rich with just beautiful language. Some of them were American-made, some of them were brought over from England. I'd like to do one from that family, one they had written down from their father. It would have been kind of a timely tale at the time he was singing it to them. It's a conversation between a husband and a wife. The husband is kind of bored with his farming there in New York State and sort of restless and thinks there must be something better, and he starts hearing about this land out even further west in the middle of our country and thinks if they move out there, things could really get become much more exciting and prosperous for them. Well, his wife is much more reasonable and sensical, and she tries to convince him that they're doing just fine, and if they just keep working at their farm, everything will be just fine. There's no need to move. So it's a conversation back and forth between the two. I'll tell my sweetheart, I've a mind to forsake my plow and my cart. Off to Wisconsin on a journey I'll go, to double my fortunes as other folks do. Whilst here I must labor each day in the field, and the winter consumes all the summer doth yield. Oh, husband, I've noticed with a sorrowful heart that long you've neglected your plow and your cart. Your sheep lie at random, disorderly run, and your new Sunday jacket goes every day on. Oh, stick to your farming and suffer no loss, for the stone that keeps rolling will gather no moss. Oh, wife, let us hasten, do not make us wait, for I long to go there and I long to be great. You might be some great lady, who knows, but I might be a rich governor before I die. Whilst here I must labor each day in the field, and the winter consumes all the summer doth yield. Oh, husband, remember your land is all cleared, which has cost you the labor of many a year. Horses, sheep, cattle, we'll all have to buy. By the time we get settled, oh, then we must die. Oh, stick to your farming and suffer no loss, for the stone that keeps rolling will gather no moss. Oh, wife, let us hasten, do not make a stand, For I long to go there, and I long to be grand. Horses, sheep, cattle are not very dear. We can feast on fat buffaloes half of the year. Whilst here I must labor each day in the field, and the winter consumes all the summer doth yield. Oh husband, remember that land of delight is surrounded by Injuns who murder by night. They'll plunder our cabin, burn it to the ground, while your wife and your children lay murdered around. Oh, stick to your farming and suffer no loss, for the stone that keeps rolling will gather no moss. Oh, wife, you've convinced me, I'll argue no more, for I've never once thought of you dying before. I love our dear children, although they are small, and I love my companion far better than all. I'll stick to my farming and suffer no loss, for the stone that keeps rolling will gather no moss. I sang that song a couple years ago for an urban audience in the city of Buffalo, where I live. They were decidedly less polite than you nice people here in Fort Edward. And we got to that part where the husband says, or the wife says, we can't move out west. If we do that, the Indians are going to murder us. And the husband's trying to decide, okay, how am I going to argue against that? When the husband decides to back down and say, you're right, we'll stay right here, right at that point in the song, this one woman in the audience stood up and she said, wham! I don't allow my wife to come to these things anymore. Well, let's take our trip and move it out east. There's a little man-made body of water that helped people get east and west. It was built in the 1820s. Of course, you all know what I'm talking about. The Erie Canal connected the ocean, really, with the Great Lakes. Went from Buffalo to Albany. By the 1850s, 1860s, the canal didn't seem so peppy anymore. Canal life started to look a little quaint because the railroads had come in, and that was, of course, much faster and cheaper still. So we have some songs that kind of poke fun at canal life, starting around the middle of the 1800s. This is one of those. It's got a little singing part for anybody who feels like singing. When I sing the words, look out that low bridge, you sing those words right back to me. You sing, look out that low bridge. So let's give that a try. I'll sing it and then you sing. Look out that low bridge.
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 People are ready to sing. And then the captain, cook, and all the crew, oh, duck your heads way down. And right there we go. See, I work with a lot of fourth graders in school. That's what we do there. The captain, cook, and all the crew, oh, duck your heads way down. The fastest ship in all the fleet, two sisters, comes to town. So you'll see where all of that fits in. This is called Oh, Dat Lo Bridge from the minstrel shows. It's many miles to Buffalo. Oh, that low bridge. Bulky mule, she's moving slow. Oh, that low bridge. There's gravel on the towpath. There's hornets in the sand. Oh, pity poor canaler, so far away from land. So look out that low bridge.
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 The captain captain, cook, and all the crew, oh, duck your heads way down. Fastest ship in all the fleet, two sisters comes to town. There's many locks to shut you in. Oh, that low bridge, every worm must learn to swim. Oh, that low bridge, we're loaded down with barley and lumber from the west. Now every poor canaler, now do your level best. So look out, that low bridge.
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 The captain, cook, and all the crew, oh, duck your heads way down. Fastest ship in all the fleet, two sisters comes to town. Turns out they really did build the bridges a little too low on the original canal. That's why we have all these songs that mention low bridges. And not surprisingly, it came down to money. They were trying to save a little money. They tried to get the federal government to pay for the building of the Erie Canal. And the federal government said, A, we don't think it's possible to dig this thing by hand for 360 some miles. And B, even if it is completed, we don't see how it's going to help anybody except you. So New York State, you're paying for the whole thing. So we paid for the whole thing ourselves, $7 million, which in the 18 teens and 20s was an awful lot of money. So they were trying to cut corners. That was the story I heard. We're froze up in the winter time. Oh, that low bridge, summer how the sun does shine. Oh, that low bridge in rain or stormy weather. The captain's on the poop, all huddled all together like chickens in a coop. So look out, that low bridge.
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 The captain, cook, and all the crew, oh, duck your heads way down. Fastest ship in all the fleet, two sisters comes to town. The lake sailors and the canalers used to meet in Buffalo. It would be the end of the canalers' route and the end of the lake sailors' route. They'd have a little money in their pockets, and they'd find themselves in some of the same establishments at night. And Buffalo's waterfront was a teeming place during much of the 1800s. Anyway, there was always a bit of a rivalry between the canalers and the lake sailors, because the lake sailors were macho and the canalers were working on 4 feet of water. So they were not considered real sailors. Anyway, the story goes, one night the lake sailors are gathered in one corner of a tavern, the canalers are in another corner. The lake sailors decide they're going to pull one over on the canalers, so on the count of 3, they all yell, "Low bridge!" What do you think the canalers did? It was so much a part of their life, they heard it so many times every day that you didn't think twice, you just ducked when someone said it. There's groceries in the cabin there. Oh, that low bridge never leaks, she's full of tar. Oh, that low bridge, there's freckles on the children, there's glanders on the mules, mosquitoes by the million that keep that golden rule. So look out, that low bridge.
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 The captain, cook, and all the crew, oh, duck your heads way down. The fastest ship in all the fleet, two sisters comes to town. The captain, cook, and all the crew, oh, duck your heads way down. Fastest ship in all the fleet, two sisters comes to town. Well, if we lived here 100 years ago, or 120 years ago, 150 years ago, there wouldn't have been cell phones ringing. Kidding. People, 90 or more % of the population of New York State lived outside of the cities. And so chances are, if you lived outside of a city, you didn't have much of a chance to see your neighbors. There were not many social opportunities back in those days. Life was very hard, and sun up to sundown and beyond, just dealing with, keeping the stuff of life together, food and work, and maybe work was related to food. And anyway, if a community was going to get together at all for a social event, it would take place on a Saturday night. And more often than not, what they would do is they'd get together and have a square dance. This happened all across New York State. It was especially big here in eastern New York and the North Country, up in the Adirondacks. They called them kitchen hops up there because if you didn't have a barn or a town hall or a tavern to do it in, people would host these things right in their houses. They'd clear out the furniture from a couple of the main rooms, and they'd have a dance right there. They'd invite the neighbors from 3, 4, 5 miles around, and they'd come together on a Saturday night. They'd start about 7, 8 o'clock, and we have many accounts of these things going until the next morning when the sun was coming up, at which point people would very slowly make their way back home. But it paints a colorful image. These kitchen hops, often the music was supplied by a single musician, if you were lucky enough to have a musician in your community. Fiddle was by far the most common instrument that people danced to, but if there wasn't a fiddler, it might be a harmonica, or even the Jew's harp, the instrument I started out with, providing the music for dancing. And the tunes that they would dance to were the old jigs and reels and hornpipes that were brought over from England and Scotland and Ireland, and some American fiddle tunes as well. I'd like to play a medley of 2 North Country fiddle tunes, tunes that we would have danced to right here in the 19th century if we had lived here. The first one has a really interesting title. It's called Juba Round the Kettle of Fat. It comes from a Lake George old-time fiddler named Earl Eddy, who's long gone, but we think it may date back to the slaves. African Americans were also big fiddlers back in those days. So Juba Round the Kettle of Fat. And then the second tune is from the family of a remarkable Adirondack woman that I've come to know lately, Ermina Pincombe. She's 78 years old, and she learned her music from her grandmother, who learned it from her uncle. So their music has been in their family for over 150 years. And this is one of the fiddle tunes their family used to dance to. They don't have a name for it, so I'll call it I'm So Miserable Without You, It's Almost Like When You're Here. So Juba Round the Kettle of Fat, and then that other one. Well, if you can make it through this next one, you can make it through anything I've got to offer tonight. It's a it's a great song, but it's a real dirge. It's yeah. Do you? Good. And of course, you have some Revolutionary War history here. This comes from the Adirondacks. It comes from a man named Yankee John Galusha, who was born in 1858 and was discovered as a keeper, a singer of these really old songs, Irish songs, British songs. He worked in the lumber camps and had other jobs as a forest ranger and such. He lived in Minerva, New York. And anyway, when he was 81 years old, the right people found him and recorded a bunch of his songs. And they were named Ann and Frank Warner. And one of the songs that he sang for them was this one called The Dying British Sergeant, or The Dying British Soldier. He said he learned it on the banks of Newcomb Lake in the 1880s. It obviously goes back long before then, but I'm not sure that it's really a British song. It tells a Revolutionary War story from a British perspective, but as you'll hear in the last verse, the British narrator ends up saying, "America, you're doing a great job, keep going." So I have a feeling maybe perhaps it was not written by a Brit, a turncoat, huh? All right, we'll see what you think. To the words of a dying man, I think you will remember them. It was in December the 18th day when our ship set sail for America. Our guns and trumpets loud did sound, and then for Boston we were bound. And when to Boston we did go, we thought by the aid of our British guns we could make those Yankees own our king, and daylight tribute to him bring. They said it was a garden place, and that our armies could with ease tear down their walls, lay waste their land, in spite of all their boasted bands. We found a garden place indeed, but in it grew many a bitter weed, which soon cut down our highest hopes, and sorely wounded our British troops. For to our sad and sore surprise, we saw men like grasshoppers rise. Freedom or death was all their cry. Believe they did not fear to die. whilst I lie cold in America. Fight on, America's loyal sons. Fear not Great Britain's thundering guns. Maintain your rights from year to year. God's on your side, you need not fear. Anybody know any good banjo jokes? There's lots of them. For some reason, this beautiful instrument has become the brunt of most of the jokes that float around in acoustic music circles. What's the difference between a banjo and a trampoline? You take your shoes off to jump on a trampoline? Perfect pitch, throwing a banjo into a dumpster? How long does it take to perfectly tune a banjo? No one knows. Well, New York, one of the things I didn't realize about the Erie Canal is that they say that New York City would not have become what it did had it not been for the Erie Canal. Before the canal was built, most shipping and most traffic coming across the ocean from Europe would enter America at Boston or Philadelphia or Baltimore or further south in Savannah, Georgia. Once the canal was built, all this traffic started to come through New York City so that it could come up the Hudson River and access the canal. New York City grew up right alongside that, and that probably would not have turned out that way had it not been for the canal. Turns out there was this woman who used to wait around on the docks at New York City, on South Street there, and wait for these sailors to get off their ships, sailors who had come from far away and hadn't been on land for many weeks or months and probably just got paid and, you know, were a little hungry and stuff. And so this woman would actually wait for these gentlemen to get off the ship, and she'd pick the ones that were from foreign countries, and she would actually take advantage of them and end up taking their money from them. Yeah, that's horrible, isn't it? Now, there may have been more than one, but there was at least one. I know, because she's in this song. The chorus is, "Away, you Johnnies, my dear honeys. Oh, you New York girls, you love us for our monies." So it's, "Away, you Johnnies, my dear honeys. Oh, you New York girls, you love us for our monies." And I'd love it if you sang that with me. It comes around about 73 or 4 times. Lots of chances. When I arrived at South Street, a fair maid I did meet. She asked me to take her home. She lived on 14th Street. Away, you Johnnies, my dear honeys. Oh, you New York girls. Oh, you New York girls, you love us for our monies. I said, "My dear young lady, I'm a stranger here in town. Just left me ship yesterday, from Liverpool I was bound. Away, you Johnnies, my dear honeys. Oh, you New York girls, you love us for our honeys. She said, if you'll only come with me, I'll give to you a treat. I'll buy you rum and brandy, dear, and tabnabs for to eat. Away, you Johnnies, my dear honeys. Oh, you New York girls, you love us for our honeys. Oh, you guys are good. I think I'm going to give you the advanced version. After away, you Johnnies, my dear honeys, we're going to go, oh! We're going to give that a big emphasis. Away, you Johnnies, my dear honeys. Oh! You New York girls, you love us for our honeys. That is beautiful. When we arrived at 14th Street, we stopped at number 4. Her mother and her sister came to greet us at the door. Away, you Johnnies, my dear honeys. Oh, you New York girls, you love us for our honeys. It's a family business, I guess. Then we walked inside the place, the drinks was handed round. That liquor was so awful strong, me head spun round and round. Away, you Johnnies, my dear honeys. Oh, you New York girls, you love us for our honeys. When I awoke next morning, I had an aching head. And there was I, Jack, all alone, stark naked on the bed. Away, you Johnnies, my dear honeys. Oh, you New York girls, you love us for our honeys. With a flour barrel for a suit, I wished I'd never been born. Then a boarding master picked me up and sent me round Cape Horn. Away, you Johnnies, my dear honeys. Oh, you New York girls, you love us for our honeys. So come all you bully sailor men, take warning when ashore, or else you'll wind up with a gal who's nothing but a problem. Away, you Johnnies, my dear honeys. Oh, you New York girls, you love us for our honeys. Your hard-earned cash will disappear, your rigging boots as well. Them Yankee girls are tougher than the other side of hell. Away, you Johnnies, my dear honeys. Oh, you New York girls, you love us for our honeys. Well, how about a song from Washington County? I don't know any. No, I do. I've been waiting 3 years at least to do this song. Maybe some of you know it. Well, only if you were in school in the 1870s. I found, about 3 years ago, digging through some files in Cooperstown, I found a song that they used to teach the Washington County school kids in the 1870s so that they could learn the names of all the towns. Now maybe some of you know this song. It's called Towns of Washington County. They think it was composed by a Miss Louisa Kuhn of West Cambridge in the 1870s. And so, let's see what we can do with it. Let's see. It's got a chorus which goes, in Washington County we'll name each town, and in our memory write it down. In Washington County we'll name each town, and in our memory write it down. So that's the part, children, we'll all sing together. Let's try it. In Washington County we'll name each town, and in our memory write it down. In Washington County we'll name each town, and in our memory write it down. From Cambridge and east and go with me to Putnam farthest north we see, and south of Putnam to Alack, in Dresden with its mountains black. In Washington County we'll name each town, in our memory write it down. In Washington County we'll name each town, and in our memory write it down. Is this ringing any bells with anyone? Yeah? Let's see. On the Little Hampton next we call, there are many people in Whitehall. Remember Granville if you can, and stop a while at Big Fort Ann. In Washington County we'll name each town, in our memory write it down. In Washington County we'll name each town, in our memory write it down. Okay, Hartford and Hebron, I declare, Kingsbury town is almost square. Be honest and upright, lest you fall and land at last in the Salem jail. In Washington County we'll name each town, and in our memory write it down. In Washington County we'll name each town, and in our memory write it down. Then on we go, and 'tis a rule to visit the Fort Edward School. Oh, save your money, lest you come to Argyle poorhouse for a home. In Washington County we'll name each town, and in our memory write it down. In Washington County we'll name each town, in our memory write it down. We take the train and hurry quick. In the southeast corner we find White Creek. To Jackson Ponds we hasten, where they used to hold the Lauderdale Fair. In Washington County we'll name each town, and in our memory write it down. In Washington County we'll name each town, and in our memory write it down. To Greenwich Station next we come, and very soon we're all at home. To Greenwich Station next we come, very soon we are all at home. In Washington County we'll name each town, and in our memory write it down. In Washington County we'll name each town, and in our memory write it down. In case you were amazed that I didn't say Greenwich, I asked somebody before we started. Now, you've heard the song before?
Yeah.
To a different tune, probably.
Yes, my son's teacher actually prepares, they do a book every year.
Uh-huh.
And they did a book called Our Common Roots.
Uh-huh.
And they researched the history of our town and our village. And they sang the song in the program.
No kidding.
But the music teacher had written music, so.
Would you be able to sing a little of it, or?
He had a different tune.
Yeah.
It was a different tune. I
Okay.
don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember it?
Not
It's working.
very well.
All right, well, if you think of it, the stage is all yours, buddy.
What about frozen lager low?
Frozen lager. That's a good one. Do you know that one?
I haven't heard it since the 60s at Cabbage, I don't remember.
Yeah, about the guy who stirs his coffee with his thumb. And his whiskers are so thick, he hits them inside with a hammer and then bites them off. I never heard that before. Here's a neat piece of music that was played at the Battle of Plattsburgh in 1814 by the revolutionary and frontier character Nicholas Stoner. He was a fifer he was also an Indian guide and a trapper and kind of a legendary frontier hero guy in New York State. Yeah.
He was credited for being the first white man to walk up the Sacandaga River.
That's right. Yeah, he was from down around where, Johnstown? Somewhere in there?
Pine Lake, Frog Lake.
Okay.
Route 10 is trail.
Okay, yeah, and you see his name a lot around there. You see Stoner Lake and neat. So anyway, when they took a break to bury the dead on both sides at the Battle of Plattsburgh, Nick Stoner reportedly played this tune on his fife, which is like a flute, called Roslyn Castle. Beautiful British death march. It also ended up naming the town of Roslyn on Long Island, which is a whole other story. But it's a beautiful song. Sure. So a friend of mine gave it to me a number of years ago. He said his brother bought it. It's made by a guy who travels around to arts and craft fairs. It's not a super expensive instrument. And anyway, he said his brother bought it and he didn't know what to do with it, so they gave it to me and they said maybe you can figure out what to do with it. So I started to play it, and for years I didn't know what it was. I thought it might be a bouzouki, which is a Greek instrument. I thought it might be a lute, but it's none of those things. It turns out what it probably is an octave mandolin. It's this being a conventional mandolin, this is an octave lower. Same notes, but tuned down. It's not a mandola, because mandola would be between this and that. And it's not an octave, it's not a mandocello either. So octave mandolin is the closest I've been able to come. Yeah.
Very great.
But very different sound from this.
So what's your top for D, G, D?
It's G, an octave lower than the top G on this. So it's G, D, A, E. Just like a violin actually, but an octave lower. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. I want to thank Nancy Fitzpatrick for making this all possible, for inviting me to be here and organizing this event in this wonderful place and with all of you wonderful people. So thank you, Nancy. And I also want to thank the New York Council for the Humanities. As Nancy mentioned, I'm just one of dozens of speakers that they have. I have a brochure on this. It's called the Speakers in the Humanities Program. I have a whole stack of them. So if you're involved in any kind of a nonprofit organization, library, historical society, museum, school. They will, for like I think it's a $35 application fee that you pay, and then the council will send out the speaker of your choice, and again, they have dozens to choose from. They will send out the speaker of your choice to give a talk or a program for your group, and it's completely free to you. They pay for everything else. So it's a fantastic program. I have a stack of brochures on it out at a table out here, so feel free to grab one of those after this last song. And I also have some books for sale, some jaw harps for sale, and some CDs out there, and a mailing list. So I'd love to meet you afterwards, or if anyone wants to hang around and ask questions or just talk, that'd be great. And I'll finish up with a song from the North Country. You may have, a few of you may have a book called Adirondack Tales. It's written by a woman named Edna West Teall. She grew up in the 1880s up in northern Essex County around the town of Essex on a farm. And much later in life, she learned how to paint, kind of like a Grandma Moses situation. It was after she had retired from journalism. She taught herself how to paint. She went back to her Adirondack community where she had grown up, and she wrote a bunch of stories of things she could remember from her childhood there, and she painted the scenes that went with it. And it's a wonderful hardcover book called Adirondack Tales. Anyway, flipping through it one day, I came upon a page that said, an old song, and I thought, okay, this is for me. And she had written out the lyrics to a song she used to hear on that farm. And I recognized it as being I don't know if she realized how old it is. It goes back to 17th century Scotland. Usually involves alcohol, but her version did not for whatever reason. But it's become one of my favorite songs to do, so I'd like to finish up with it. And thank you all again for being here. The husband comes home and things don't quite look the same as they did when he left. And he tries to figure out why. The old man, he came home one night, his young wife to see. There he found another coat where his coat ought to be. Well, you old fool, you silly fool, you foolish fool, said she. That's only a bed quilt dear mother sent to me. Well, I've traveled this wide world over 10,000 miles or more, but buttons on a bed quilt I ain't never seen before. The old man, he came home the next night, his young wife to see. There he found another arm where his arm ought to be. Well, you old fool, you silly fool, you foolish fool, said she. That's only a rolling pin dear mother sent to me. Well, I've traveled this wide world over 10,000 miles or more, but fingers on a rolling pin I ain't never seen before. The old man, he came home the next night, his young wife to see. There he found another head where his head ought to be. Well, you old fool, you silly fool, you foolish fool, said she. That's only a cabbage head dear mother sent to me. Well, I've traveled this wide world over 10,000 miles or more, but a mustache on a cabbage head I ain't never seen before.
great program. And I'd like to thank Linda Hermans and Tom Dufour before too for creating this great space. They're doing a terrific job. A lot of it is volunteer effort as well, but this is really a community theater, and it's just marvelous. Thank you very much. We're also some more refreshments if you want some more water.
First, you push me up.